Please listen carefully.
Welcome back to the Focus Target Podcast. This is your host, Smiley, here with you with Shy and Van, my two co-hosts. Season 3, Episode 91, where we are going to give a definitive result of our sports bet and also talk a little bit about hockey. We're going to talk about some do a kind of ask me anything with me, since I've been watching hockey since about sixth grade back in '96 when the Avs moved to Colorado from Quebec, and so I'm going to help with some hockey knowledge, so just some general questions that the fellows had for everybody. And so, are you guys excited for that? Are you excited for hockey? Ask me anything. Are you as excited as me, Shy and Van?
Yes, hockey sensei.
Senpai.
I like it. I'll allow it for sure. But before we get to all that, we're gonna do a quick question of the day. We have a lot to get to today. I want to make sure we have time for the AMA. So let's try to. And this is something that I think we could definitely go deep on. And so if it feels like we need something more on it, we can. But question of the day today, just last time we talked a little bit about free will, and we got into time travel a little bit, and some talked in destiny, fate, things like that. So what's your favorite movie that has to do with like time travel or fate or destiny or free will or just anything kind of weird like that? It doesn't have to be, we'll allow whatever, but what's a movie that you think of that involves that sort of stuff? Let's start with Van Dene.
So it's funny, I was watching Back to the Future 1 yesterday.
Nice.
And then was it 2 days ago? And it just happened to be Michael J. Fox's birthday too. And Cheeny's like, "Oh, are you watching this because Michael J. Fox's birthday?" I was like, "No, that's just a stellar coincidence." I was like, "I'm actually watching this to do research for a question of the day." But that's not my answer.
You're trying to verify if it was your favorite, and it turns out it wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. I forgot how good it was though. I was watching, I was like, "Man, this is a great movie."
Those are good movies. Yeah, for sure.
No, so my number one favorite time travel movie, if you will, is Interstellar. Or at least one that has like time continuum randomness involved in it. Two scenes stuck out specifically that are just absolutely fascinating. When they crest the event horizon, not when they crest the event horizon, but when they're close to a planet that is close to a black hole, that it's spinning so fast that time, because as the faster you go in space, the slower time is relative to you, for those who are not moving at that speed. So then, and just the line that they say, and I'm going to bastardize it, but it was like, 1 hour here is 7 minutes or 7 years on Earth. So we got to be very cautious with our time. And so that means like if they were ever going to go back home, everything would have aged 7 years for every hour that they're on that freaking planet. And that was just like fascinating how mathematically that works out to be correct. And then the other one, of course, is when they go through the event horizon and they actually end up in this construct from higher beings that allow them to communicate back in time to his daughter in a previous dimension and all that fun stuff. So it was, it's pretty awesome. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's one of those movies where the first time you watch it, you're going to be like, okay, that was a lot of cool graphics and some weird things happen. And then like the second time you watch it, you're like, oh, I kind of understand it a little bit better. And then third time, fourth time, it has that Matrix effect where the more you watch it, the more it just starts to feel more familiar, understandable. You can kind of preemptively pay attention to scenes that you didn't understand quite so much before and tie it together. So, but it's a absolute fascinating movie, and it's Matthew McConaughey. Everybody loves Matthew McConaughey.
I like that first scene that you're talking about too, because it's they're on that ocean planet, and like just like that giant tidal wave that comes is really
gnarly, right?
Yeah, I thought that was a cool. We saw that in theaters, and I thought that was pretty neat.
Well, the scene when they get back to the ship, because they left a crew member on the ship behind,
and
when they get back, and he is 7 to 14 years older, and he just they look at him, he's got a beard, and just like it really like solidifies your mind, like time isn't like we experience time and we think like time is like a set thing, like that boggled my mind, that whole scene.
All right, well, what about you, Shy?
So mine is a much more of like an indie film, and I don't know if either of you have ever seen it. Have either of you ever seen Donnie Darko, the movie?
Is that really an indie film? I mean, maybe it's an indie
I
film.
mean,
I think it was.
I always felt it was
pretty popular. It was
it's like
pretty
a cult
popular for its
classic.
time.
It's a cult
It
classic.
is
I
a
mean,
cult
like
classic,
indie as
yeah.
in like low budget, I guess. Maybe that's what I said.
Okay.
You know, I mean, it doesn't like it has well-known like a well-known actors, but
Oh
it's
yeah,
not
a bunch
like
of well-known actors.
it's not big budget. It's not major special
Dude,
effects.
freaking Seth Rogen, Patrick Swayze, Drew Barrymore. Really?
Wait,
That's
they
what I
were.
was gonna say. It didn't.
Wait, they
didn't
were.
feel like-
Man, it's been a long time since I've seen it. The only one I think,
Yeah.
the only one I remember is Jake Gyllenhaal, the main actor. I don't remember.
Jake Gyllenhaal.
I don't think I knew
and
Seth
his- I guess his
Rogen was
wife.
at the time. Honestly, like I don't.
It
think I
wasn't.
would've
It was.
recognized
It was
him.
kind of before his.
Man, now I need to
his
go back and
heyday.
watch that again. But like, I remember like that came out in college, and it was kind of this like weird cult classic because like the bunny with a knife. Like there was like, oh, there's like this creepy bunny with a knife. But I remember when I took Intro to Philosophy, or maybe it was. What was it? I think I took metaphysics, and there were a couple movies that our teacher required us to watch. One was 12 Monkeys, which is another really good time travel film, and one was Donnie Darko. And like I don't really remember exactly how even time travel like played. I remember it being a super weird movie, but like there was like that like a worm, like almost like a metaphysical thing that would like lead him around, and and he would do things, and it was like I think that was a representation of like what he was gonna do, or like a timeline basically. And like Smiley's looking at me being like, you're bastardizing this plot.
I haven't seen Donnie Darko since I was in high school, so I don't remember it very much.
That's all I remember is like this weird thing, and it somehow I think represented like a timeline, and like he would like act it out, and it was, I don't know, it was just a really intriguing film. I just thought really well done, and not just like this weird like cliched blockbuster where it's a time heist kind of movie, you know what I mean, like, which are fun and great, but like they don't, Back to the Future where there's a ton of paradoxes and no actual thought.
All right. No, that's good. That's a good one. I'll have to watch Donnie Darko again. I forgot there was really even time travel in it. But like I said, it's been a long time. So for mine is more along the lines of Vance. It's less about time travel, more about time dilation. And there were some really, really tough choices here, but the one I have to go with is Inception. I really love Inception. And just that idea that you could stretch time out to be, kind of almost infinitesimal by going deeper and deeper into dreams. What a cool concept. And like, if that was true, like the ramifications of what you could do with that, like it's almost a path towards immortality in a way. The idea where like, if you could do that, you could live hundreds of lifetimes in the span of your own. It's a fascinating idea, and I just love that movie. So, not like the most time travel centric, but certainly I think.
You think Elon Musk is going to get us there with his implants
Somehow I doubt
into his brain?
You never know, but
apparently he sold everything, all his assets except for one house, so that he could focus literally on all of his primary objectives, getting people to Mars, the implant thing with the brain, Tesla, all that stuff. So yeah,
that might be an interesting podcast to do at some point too. Like I think there's a little bit
just Elon Musk podcast.
Yeah.
I think we can interview him. Van, can you pull some strings? Get him on the show.
On? Yeah,
get him on the show.
I'll tweet him. He's unique enough to where I would not be surprised if he was like, sure, I'll go on your one-person podcast and blow you guys up.
Maybe we let him smoke on it so he can have a big old blunt and be like, like in that meme everybody likes to point out.
Yeah.
All right, well, if you have a favorite time travel, fate, destiny, free will type movie that you'd like to tell us about, that you'd like us to discuss, or like us to inform us about, our information will be at the show for how you can contact us, and we'd love to hear from you. So let's get on to hockey. So we had a bet famously on this podcast, or on this pod. We our primary bet, in the terms of which was one retail full price video game, $60 value, for whoever between the Golden Knights and the Avalanche could advance further into the 2021 postseason. And last night that was decided as the Avalanche lost their fourth straight game to Golden Knights.
Incredible.
After having a two game lead, after winning their first 6 in a row in the playoffs, and like 13 of their last 14 in the regular season, they dropped 4 in a row to Vegas and are done. So, Van, let me know what, if you know now, or if you could tell the pod. If not, you'll have to follow up and let the people know what you picked.
I don't know how long.
Remember that your value is actually $65. because you gave me 5 bonus us on the.
Yeah, well, I
on
might
the
have to.
last
I
one.
might have to give you an extra 5. Oh no, I shouldn't because it's a PC game. So
Okay.
2042 trailer was just the reveal trailer was just announced. Now I
Okay.
don't think the game comes out till October, so that's gonna be a while away. I'm sure I'll think of something before then. But immediately when I thought of our wager, that was the first game that came to mind. I was like, ooh, you know what? 2042. It's a game he knows I'm gonna play hours and hours of, so it'll be worth it.
Oh yeah. Well, you can, call in the favor when you're ready. But yeah, just remember you have 65 to spend, and
Cool.
when you decide what to do with it, for sure, we'll have to let the podcast know. I do think that like it struck me, and maybe it's just because I lost, but that like it's kind of like kicking a man when he's down. It's like not only did my team get knocked down, now I got to buy you a video
kind
game.
of brutal.
We really ought to
the other way around.
It was kind of should be the other way around, especially because like you still have something to do. Like if
Right.
anybody needs a new game to kind of
Right.
console them and get them, fill the 3-hour gaps that are going to be in my evenings now, it would be me. So
I thought the same thing.
we
And
might
honestly,
have to flip that next time.
the bet had escaped my mind until I saw it on the podcast too, and then I was like, oh crap! Now we got to do a podcast recap on top of it too, and I was like, this is not comfortable.
It's all good.
But it is what it is, and you're a man of your word. So
Yeah, indeed. Well, it was a good series. It was, I think
it's a wild series, dude.
it was
We could spend the whole
crazy.
podcast talking about the series. It's just
We
out of
could,
control.
and maybe we'll get back to it a little bit if we have time at the end. Just depending how fast we run through some of these questions. But I will say that
Shy.
It,
If
what,
we have time at the end, he just rolls his eyes.
well, this is a little bit different of a format, though.
Yeah,
This
we'll
is
see.
more of
Yeah.
we've never really done one like this before, and so you're absolutely right. We probably won't, but you just never know, right? We're doing something a little bit different. But I do want to say, I think that there's a good chance that, especially considering the division that the Golden Knights are in, unless the newcomer Kraken end up being a real powerhouse. I think the Avs and the Golden Knights could meet again in the next couple of years. I think they're both going to be around, and the more exciting thing is since we had to have this head-to-head matchup in the second round this year because of the COVID reorganization. The cool thing is, should the Avs and the Golden Knights meet in the playoffs in the future, it would most likely be in the conference finals, which will have perhaps a little bit more weight to it. So,
Yeah.
Can I stir the
I was
pot
going
a
to
little
ask
bit?
about that. Like,
yeah.
Go ahead, Chai.
Well, no, why don't you, Fan? I'll wait till after.
Well, I was just going to ask him about I don't think we have org structure as one of our questions, right? It was like, how is it going to differ next year versus this year? Because I certainly don't remember, in previous years, the Avs and the Sharks, the Kings and the Ducks all being in the same division. But then, unlike football, they don't have a national and American division. So, like, how do they separate these teams that are so geographically so close to one another?
Well, let's let Shai do it, and then we'll actually open the AMA with that.
Good, yeah, that'd be a better segue. Cool. I was going to try to stir the pot and say maybe if you're talking about this proposed rivalry between the Golden Knights and the Avs, maybe we should start Bet 2.0, and it could be which team wins the most playoff meetings in the next 3 to 5 years, and the loser has to buy the other person a Switch Pro.
Just the other person. Oh, okay.
You mean a Switch Pro Plus?
Oh yeah, a Super Nintendo Switch Pro.
Maybe their flight to the next Palooza. We do?
A house,
I
don't know.
Yeah.
That would be fun to do like a 3-way bet between the 3 teams.
That would be.
And that way it could be something a little bit more expensive because the 2 losers could pool they could split the cost of whatever the third person's was. So that could be kind of a way to make it a little bit bigger without.
I mean, you don't have to call them losers.
Well, that's what happens when you don't win. Like, for example,
Smiley's feeling it.
I am the loser.
Smiley's really
right? I lost. It's
just
semantics, right?
Like, we're asking you questions.
So, yeah. All right. So, yeah. So, I mean, that's it. I got to take my hats off to the Golden Knights. They did what they needed to do. They outplayed the Avalanche for enough of the games, and if they did the one thing really well, it was they took advantage of their opportunities, and that is what the Avalanche were not able to do. Because I think if each scoring chance in the series had been a goal, then the Avs would have won this in 6.
Especially the last game too.
The Avs
shots on goal was
they dominated games 5 and 6, and Fleury was great, and they couldn't get enough past him. And when they had their chances, they buried him. And that's what it's a funny thing about hockey. Like,
just some of those shots seem so impossible. I'm like, how did those go in? Like, and that's not by mistake. You're telling me that was intentional? Like, it's out of control.
It's amazing what they can do. Yeah, especially when you see guys tipping things and or do you think
the
like
puck's coming 100 miles an hour and they're getting the right angle,
that
the right
Alex Tuck
force.
goal from Game 5 where he like whacked it out of midair and just popped it past.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
There were some really cool goals.
It's crazy.
Good stuff. But all right, ask me anything, Sensei Smiley. In the house,
we'll start with that division question.
Division and conference. So this year they had to. So basically, in general, the NHL currently is split into an Eastern Conference and a Western Conference. Each conference has 2 divisions: the Metropolitan and the. I don't care about the Eastern Conference, so I actually have to look this up. Sorry.
Oh man, stumping him on the first question.
I can never remember.
I thought it would take a few questions to get him.
I can never remember if it's the South or the East, or I forget what they call it in the East.
While he's looking that up, Shai, do you remember when we had a Jeopardy question like 5 years ago? And one of the Jeopardy questions was just name 3 hockey teams, and like none of us could do it.
I don't remember that.
It's like, boy, how far we've come.
We'd kill that now.
Oh, no.
Like name 3 players.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it's the Atlantic Division, Atlantic and Metropolitan in the East. In the Western Conference, it's a little bit easier. It's the Pacific and the Central, right? So you got the Pacific, which is the 3 California teams. San Jose, LA, Anaheim, the 3 western-ish Canadian teams, which is Edmonton, Calgary, and Vancouver, and Phoenix, or I think Arizona now. And now the Kraken will be, and then of course Vegas came over there. Now, I believe next year, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I'm pretty sure next year the Kraken will come into that Pacific division, and the Coyotes, Arizona, will be moving to the Central so that it's actually even numbers. The Central is where the Avalanche live, of course. Chicago, Dallas, Minnesota, St. Louis. Arizona will be there next. Who am I forgetting? Nashville. And then the Atlantic is the like everything, like, so the Metropolitan is like basically like the New York area for the most part. It's like Washington, the Islanders, the Rangers, the Devils, the Penguins, and then they also get, and the Flyers. So like that kind of Philly, Washington, New York area.
Yeah.
And then they also get some of the kind of south, a little bit of the Southeast fellas, the Carolina and Columbus get lumped in there. And then the Atlantic is basically everybody else on the East Coast. So you got the Florida teams in the Lightning and the Panthers. You got the Canadian teams, the Maple Leafs, the Canadians. Oh, Winnipeg is the other team that's in the Central. I knew I was forgetting somebody.
So with regard to our 3 teams, how did they look with one another?
So they'll all be in the Western Conference, which means that the latest they could meet on the road to the Stanley Cup would be the Western Conference Finals. Yep. Right. The Kraken and the Golden Knights will be in the same division, the Pacific, which is at least this year was much weaker.
So that's what the Kings and
much weaker.
Oh, they were so bad. Yep. Sharks, Ducks.
All the California teams and all the Canadian teams, and U2 basically. And then so the way the playoffs are formatted in the NHL, at least, again, this is pre-COVID, so we assume we're going back to this format next year.
Right.
I haven't actually heard that officially, but that's we're assuming that we're going back to that same format that we were in. So next season in the playoffs, the way it works is the number one. There's basically the top 3 teams in each division get into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 division winners are 1 and 2. Then the next 2 in each division are 3, 4, 5, 6 in some order. And then there's 2 more wild card teams that can come from either division. Right? Like historically, the last number of years before COVID, the Central Division has actually had 5. They've had both wild cards, and the Pacific has only had the 3 get in. But at least 3 from each division are guaranteed to get in. And then the way it works is 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, and the 2 and 3 in each division always play each other, regardless of their records. So basically, you tend to have divisional matchups, other than the wild card. Then in the second round, assuming that if the division winners went on to win, which normally they would, they play the winner of their divisional matchup, regardless of if they were 1 and 2 and how it works out. So typically you play within your division until you get to the
exhausted.
Conference.
Yeah.
Yes. That's basically how that works. So that's what I was saying before, is typically the Avalanche would meet either the Kraken or the Golden Knights in either, if they're not very good, potentially in the wild card matchup, but otherwise it would be in the Western Conference Finals. Whereas you guys will more likely play each other in the second round, should you get that far. First round and second round. I guess it would be possible for the Kraken and the Golden Knights to meet in the Western Conference Finals, though it would take an unlikely, combination of
improbable, possible, but improbable.
Yeah, maybe both of you being, like, if you were the 2 wild card teams, maybe that could happen, and then you still were able to win up through. That'd be a way that could happen.
That explains it.
So yeah, all right.
Cool. All right.
What is your next question?
Smiley, I got a question for you, and I think this might be a quick one. But coming from the NFL and the NFL draft, I was used to the order of selection in a draft being purely based on your team's record at the end of the season. But the NHL uses something called a lottery draft, which I was surprised by, and I was wondering, like, how would the Kraken would pick, and I kind of observed this recently. They did the selection, but I'm curious if you could explain to our viewers, like, what a lottery draft looks like.
Yeah, so it's similar to what they do in the NBA, and a lot of leagues, I guess, do this type of thing, but notably, as you said, not the NFL. What it is I believe the lottery, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I believe the reason they do a lottery is for these leagues that have a longer season, like the basketball and hockey. You've got 80 games. When you're a bad team, you kind of know sometimes that you're not going to make the playoffs. Sometimes, 20, 30 games out from the end of the season. And so what they want to do is they want to put in a reason to not necessarily tank for the lowest pick. And I feel like there are much smarter ways to do it than a lottery. But for some reason, a lottery, to say, just because you finish last doesn't guarantee that you're going to get the first pick. So you might as well not worry about it, So what they do is they take all the teams that don't make the playoffs are entered into the lottery. And they based on your final ranking, regular season ranking, you're giving odds to win the number 1 pick based on the worse you did, the higher your odds. So if you finish dead last, you have the highest chance of getting that number 1 pick, but it's like, I don't know. I don't know what the actual odds turned out to be. I didn't actually watch the draft this year, but usually it's pretty good, but not like, it's like maybe around 50% for the worst team, and then the next to worst team has another percent chance of moving up potentially, right? And so typically what they do is they'll do a lottery, not to redo the entire order, but they'll do a lottery for the first 3 picks in the draft. So they'll roll third, second, and first. And then if your team gets it, you basically just move up in the list. So let's say you do the lottery, and it goes by the chalk, right? The team that had the best odds, the last place team, gets the first pick. The team that got second worst gets the second pick, and the team that got third worst gets the third pick. Okay, so in that case, nothing changes, right? If instead, though, let's say the 6th ranked team wins the first overall pick, basically they just move to the top and they get number 1, and then everybody else moves down. So in that way, if you're the worst team in the league, the worst you could possibly pick is 4th if 3 teams from below you happen to jump ahead of you, right? That's what happened to the Avalanche the year that they finished last in the league. They had the best odds to get the top pick. They got passed by 3 other teams and fell to 4th, which everybody was like, could this season get any worse? But by lucky happenstance, they got to draft Cale Makar that year, and I think are very happy about it because he's turned out to be a better player than any of the 3 taken before him. So, sometimes those things work out. But
cool.
But yeah, that's how that works. Now, it's a little bit of a different wrinkle this year. And do you want to talk about the expansion draft? Should we touch on that just briefly?
Yeah. Do you want? Yeah, that's worth it probably.
Sure. So, with the expansion draft, basically before the regular draft, the new team, in this case Seattle, will have an opportunity to pick one player from each of the 30 other teams. Then you say, why not 31 teams? Because there's 31 teams. Because Vegas, being a recent expansion, is exempt from the draft, so they don't get to pick from Vegas. So, but the other 30 teams all have to give up one player to the Kraken. Now, the nice thing about the draft for those people is the Kraken don't just get to take the best team off of every player and make a super team. Each team gets to protect a certain number of players, and that number varies based on how they have a couple options of how they want to do it. They can protect more players if they only protect a certain amount at each position, or if they want to protect, say, more forwards or more defensemen than they're allowed, they can overall protect less players in order to focus on one particular position. But overall, each team gets to protect basically 8 or 9 of their top guys, and the Kraken get to pick from there. And when they do pick them, everything transfers over. It's like they just signed them off that team. So whatever contract they're under transfers over, and they are responsible for. So what these guys are making, how long their contracts are, comes into play. It's not just about the player. They have to, if somebody's on a good contract or a bad contract, like they have to take that into account. And so then,
that's crazy.
After that draft happens, when the real draft happens, the Kraken they were entered into the draft lottery as well, and I don't think you watched it, didn't you? They didn't move up, did they?
They did. They were the only. Basically, I think the top 3 were the Buffalo Sabres, and then I think it was the Anaheim Ducks, and then it was the Kraken. Were like based on odds, and the Kraken got 2, so they knocked the Ducks down to 3.
So they normally would have been basically inserted as the 3rd pick, and they moved up in the draft from the draft lottery. Okay, so they'll get to pick 2nd there. So, and then after that, they're basically treated just like any other team. And if they play their cards right, they can do what the Vegas Golden Knights did, which was basically have a team that's been to the playoffs every year of their existence and is now headed for their 3rd conference finals in 4 years, which not a bad way to come into the league,
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, I got one.
All right.
Add a little excitement to these questions as well. Not that the other ones weren't that exciting, but how are fights or scuffles handled? I feel like sometimes people are ripping off gloves, sometimes helmets are falling off, sometimes they're on the ground, sometimes the officials are stopping it, and sometimes they're not, and I just don't understand any rhyme or reason to any of it.
Sure. Well, that's because there kind of isn't any. It's very subjective. It kind of depends which refs are working the game, what they want, how the game is going, and what they want to allow and not. The general rule of thumb is if 2 players drop their gloves, right, they both take their gloves off, that's considered an official hockey fight. If the gloves come off and they start throwing fisticuffs. Generally, not always, but generally, the refs will let them have that out to a certain extent. And then once either one guy goes down, or it's, they just kind of lock up and aren't doing much, or if one of the refs thinks that a guy is like in danger or for something, they'll come in and break it up. But usually they'll let them, take a couple shots at each other, kind of work it out.
Just standing by watching, like, this is your guys' scrap too?
It's like I don't know if it's a minor or a major penalty, but you cannot interfere with an ongoing fight. So if 2 dudes are locked up, if 2 dudes have dropped the gloves, and a 3rd person comes in, the rest will immediately try to stop that.
Right, for
and that part, like, I think it might be a 10-minute misconduct and a game objective. Like
But the 2 people fighting, They can get scrappy.
Yeah, they don't want a third guy coming up from behind and
sucker punching someone.
like it, and I think there's also as part of like the code of hockey, like if two guys square up and drop the gloves, like you don't get involved in that. Like I've never once
getting
seen
sucker punched. Nobody's getting choked at that point. Like
in that case,
two guys making a decision. Yeah,
that's right.
Yep.
I never once have I seen like a third guy trying to come in and like because that would be not only disrespectful to the game, but like that's disrespects your own guy as much. It's like you don't think I can handle this? Like let me handle this, right? Like that. Yeah. But yeah, so in that case, that's considered a 5-minute major for fighting to both players, right? Whoa. So both players will go off for 5 minutes. Since it's matching 5-minute majors, it's not like a 4-on-4 for 5 minutes. It's just those players are just unavailable. And you'll see that because it's not a power play or a man disadvantage or a man reduction, that those players actually can't come out. The 5-minute major tends to be actually more than 5 minutes because they can't come out of the box until the stoppage after the penalty expires. So, for example, I think we saw this in one of the games with the Golden Knights. We were talking about that. Like if let's say two guys get 5-minute majors for fighting, right? They serve 5 minutes and 58 seconds, and then there's a whistle. Okay, and they go to drop the puck. Well, they don't get to come out yet because their penalty's not up.
Yeah.
Once the puck's dropped and the 5 minutes has elapsed, now they can come out, but not till it stops. So if there's not a stoppage for another 4 minutes, 5 minutes of play, like those guys still can't come out. They're still not available to their team. So, like.
And is that because technically you still have 5?
Yeah, because there's 5. Right. Yeah, there's 5 on.
Too many men on the field, so to speak.
Too many men on the ice, and like it's. I think it's just a rule too, like because you would think depending who's in the box, you might really want that guy to come out, especially if it's one of your good players. Like, couldn't you just like send out 4 and like let him come out? But I don't think like they don't open the penalty box until a stoppage in that situation. So.
And is that for all major penalties? You said
no. That's for specifically for fighting because they're matching. Generally, rarely do you have matching majors in other parts of the game. In which case, you are like a major penalty. You would still be down a man. The difference between a minor and a major, of course, is that on a minor penalty is 2 minutes, and once you get scored on, the penalty ends. In a 5-minute major, that doesn't happen, so you can score as many times as you want. Famously,
I think Colorado wiped like 3 penalties, 3 power play times against the Golden Knights.
Well, famously, 2 years ago in the Sharks Golden Knights series, the Sharks were winning Game 7. Like, I think it was 3-1 or 4-2 or something. They got a major penalty, and the Golden Knights scored 3 times. Took the lead, took it into overtime or something, and ended up winning the game. And it was insane, like, because a lot of people didn't feel like the major was really warranted there. It was in the third period of a Game 7, and it completely took the Sharks out. And so because of that instance 2 years ago, now all major penalties are actually reviewed by the referees in the team in Toronto to make sure. And like, so after they're reviewed, the referee gets an opportunity to either waive it off or lower it to a 2 minute if they deem it wasn't actually a major because of that game, because of a kind of a phantom.
So when are they going to start doing that to delay of games?
Well, delay of games is kind of another. Well, but I mean, that's the thing about delay of games is like delay of game is very cut and dry, right? If you put the puck over the net, like
intentionally, sure, unintentionally.
Well, but how do you judge intent versus just so
if you're on their side,
I think you can do that.
You're probably not going to throw it into the stands, right?
Smiley brings a good point, like in that I think especially like when you talk about fights and scuffles, like the amount of cheap shots you see players take because they can get away with it. Like, I mean, and judging intent is hard.
So they're always grabbing collars and freaking.
So that's a good point. To answer this, so that was the official. That's the official fighting, right? Yeah. But you also talking about the scuffles, and there's a lot of scuffling. There's a lot of coming together and
elbows and
a lot of things that you wonder how is that not a penalty. Again, it's very subjective. A lot of times, the magic thing you do is if you actually throw a punch. A lot of times that's where they'll ding you. If you see a guy, take a shot at
Yeah.
somebody. That's what they usually call that, assuming they see it.
Or like the elbow or grabbing the collar and just like yanking them, or
a lot of times you'll see if guys kind of get into it pretty heavily like that, they'll get matching minors for like roughing, and in that case, a lot of times it is a 4-on-4 situation. Generally, if there's matching minors and then an additional penalty on one side or another, they don't go 4-on-3. In that case, it'll be more like a fighting situation where they'll cancel the 2s out, put the guys in the box, have a 5-on-4, and then the other 2 guys just don't get to come out until the penalties are over and there's a stoppage. But it is that part is very, and you can hear sometimes the refs talking to the players. Usually it doesn't pick it up, but like the refs talk a lot and say, listen, like, break this up, or one of you guys is going, or I'm sending both of you off, or whatever. So it's it's kind of at the ref's discretion. It depends what the game is like. A lot of times if games start to get out of hand, they'll start handing out the penalties a little bit more liberally to try to calm things down and say, hey, we're not just going to keep doing this, otherwise you're going to the box. Whereas if it's not that out of control, sometimes they just let the guys jostle. But it's hard. It's hard.
I understand that as a parent.
Sometimes regulating that way.
Yeah.
There you go.
All
I'm
right,
not going to keep threatening you. I'm not going to keep arguing.
I got one for you.
All right.
Watching hockey recently, I've noticed that there's shot counters on the screen, and it's a pretty important statistic in the game because you're basically seeing how much each team is shooting and then how much they're scoring goals and figuring that out. But I noticed that not every time, the announcers will be like, shot went wide, or shot, they use the word shot, but it doesn't correlate with what is shown on the shot counter. And so to the best of your ability, what is a shot? Like, what counts as a shot that goes on a shot counter?
It's actually pretty easy. An official, what's considered a shot on goal for the purposes of the statistic, is a shot that is directed towards the net that the goalie has to make a save on, or that goes in, right? If there's a little bit of subjectivity, if they decide that, like, it's such a, like, sometimes it comes in so soft that, like, was that a shot, or did, like, the goalie, like, was it really going to go in? Like, but, like, basically it has to, like, if you imagine, like, if the goalie is not there, would it have gone in the net? So a lot of times if they shoot high and the goalie reaches up and grabs it with his glove, it doesn't actually count as a shot because, like, that puck wasn't going in anyway. That's not really a save, right? He didn't save it from going in. He just grabbed the puck as if, no more than if it was just coming around the boards and he stopped it. That's not a save. That's going to retrieve the puck. So that's the key. A lot of times now, because that shot metric can be a little bit misleading, they actually have a different statistic a lot of times that they'll show you, which is shots directed towards the net, because there's a number of things that prevent a shot directed towards the net from counting. One is how many times did you miss the net? 2, how many times did the shot get blocked? If a player blocks the shot by a player, not the goalie, obviously, that'd be a save. But if the defenseman or whatever gets in the way and blocks it, that doesn't count as a shot either. It counts as a shot block. And then, of course, if you hit the post, it does not count as a shot because it wasn't going into the net. Like, obviously, unless it's posted in and counts as a goal. But so anytime it hits the iron, you'll notice that does not tally as a shot, even though it was very close. So a lot of times, especially if a team, I think we saw it a couple times in that Vegas series. Vegas did a great job. They're a very good shot blocking team, blocking with sticks, blocking with bodies. The Avalanche had a lot of shots directed towards the net that did not make it on either because they were blocked or because they missed. They missed, especially in that game 6. They missed a lot of really good shots. So, so more and more we're seeing that shot directed at net statistic, which I think is valuable to take into account.
Cool. Color me
informed. It kind of measures like a whole team performance as opposed to just the goalie kind of thing.
Exactly. Yep.
All right, I got what could be a lengthy question, but it's probably like my most important question or thing to understand. But I certainly don't want to spend too much time on it because we're not even halfway through our questions. But like, how are players organized as far as like lines and shifts and substitutions. Like they talk about like, oh, the fourth line or the second line, but it's not like all 5 players. Sometimes it's only 3, and then so which 2 stay out, which 2 don't. Like walk me through that kind of stuff.
All right. So you're the basic team, and this isn't mandated, but most teams on any given night roll out 12 forwards, 6 defensemen, 2 goalies, your starter and your backup. That's the 20. You're allowed 20 players, and that's the typical setup. There are times when you can play with 11 forwards and 7 defensemen. You can play with 13 forwards and 5 defensemen. Yeah. But typically that's what you do is 12, 6, and 2. The 12 forwards are divided into 4 forward lines of 3 each, right? Typically, and these lines sometimes they get mixed and matched during the game as players, like they're not set in stone, but for the most
somebody
part,
breaks his stick, they're gonna want to get him off the ice quickly, and then
somebody
else can hop in or something.
Or sometimes guys get caught out there for a long time, like one guy goes to change, but then the puck gets turned over, and so now you got 2 guys on one line who are back, and the other guy from the next line's already on, but like they can't. The other guys can't leave because they're in trouble now. So it's not a hard and fast thing. But what the purpose of the lines is for chemistry, right? For communication, for like getting to know each other, playing with the same people, learning how they work, what you can expect from them. That's the benefit of keeping a line together is you get that familiarity, and so you see that with some of the great lines. I mean, the Landeskog, McKinnon, Rantanen line for the Avalanche is well known for being they've been together for a long time. They kind of know where each others are going to go on the ice. They work very well together, and like that helps with the passing and the timing and things like that. So typically your top 2 lines, which is called your top 6, are basically like for the most part your best players, right? Most teams have their top 6 are like their 6 best scoring players in some order. And they kind of get organized based on chemistry, right? Your third line traditionally is what's called the checking line, which tends to be your better defensive players. Like every coach has a different philosophy, every game has a different philosophy, but we saw it a little bit in the Avalanche Vegas series, right? The third line tends to be your better defensive forwards, and so if you have if you're the home team and you get to choose the matchups, you would generally want to put your third line, your checking line, against their top scorers to try to limit them. You want your first line to be against either their second line or their fourth line. So that's one of the ways you can get a matchup advantage, right? Like you want your best offensive players going against their worst defensive players, and your best defensive players going against their best offensive players to try and shut them down. So that's where some of the line matching strategy comes in. And then your fourth line tends to be like everybody else, right? Like the guys who for Vegas, I think it's a little bit different. Vegas, their fourth line is more their defensive line, right? That's Reeves,
their fourth line is
Polistar.
The regulators, Carrier and
more typically like the enforcers, the regulators, the heavier checking guys. I mean, third and fourth line are often interchangeable, especially on a lot of different teams. Like it just depends how your team is built and what you've got. And every team is a little bit different.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Like because I'm looking at their line right now, especially their lines, and it's pretty neat. Like in watching them for the past 14 games in a row, like. You see the people on the first line, and it's Max, it's Pacioretty, Stevenson, and Stone, and you see how fast they are, how often they score, and all that stuff. Defensively, they're involved or whatnot, but then as you go down the lines, you totally see like the people bulk up, they get a little more defensive, they're less taking shots on goals and things like that. Like, it's pretty neat.
Well, from a Vegas point of view, like Marchessault, Carlson, and
the second line, Smith.
Yeah, Smith, like they've been together basically since the beginning of the Golden Knights. Like they were all from that first year, and so that's a line that they keep together because of the chemistry. They work very well together. They know where they're going to be. Like you could break those guys up, but then they don't maybe have the same. They're kind of more than the sum of their parts in a way, right? When you have a line, so that's the benefit of that. Your defense, which is 6 players, is in pairs of 2. for the most part. Again, like the Avalanche very famously this year really shuffled their defensemen a lot, and even during this series, have like everybody kind of play with everybody. But typically, you do the same thing with defensemen. You have your left and your right defensemen. You pair them up into three pairings. Your top pair tends to be your best defenders that you want to be out on the ice against your opponent's top line. You got your middle two, which are, your next up guys, and your third two, which tend to not play as much. Because defensemen can play a lot longer because they don't have to go quite as much back and forth. You tend to see defensemen will play longer minutes than forwards. And so that's one of the reasons they don't need 4 pairs. They, those 3 play bigger shares of the game. And also, like, your top defensive players tend to play a lot, like
Pietrangelo, I see him out there all the time.
He's out
I'm like,
every
on the
day
ice for 60 minutes. Like, what the fuck? What's going on?
That's how it is. Like, your top pairing tends to be on basically every other shift. So it's accurate.
That's super helpful. And then I'm looking at these lines, and I didn't even realize that they have a first power play unit line and a second power play unit, depending on, I guess, who's in the penalty box and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's
we'll talk about power play, penalty kill. I think if we get time for it, that's we have a little bit more.
Cool.
On that.
Thanks, Mike. That was actually super helpful and digestible.
2 more little things to mention. So, like, the reason, like, even though there's 5 players on the ice, the reason that they're not set into lines of 5 is, for one, because you have an unbalanced number, right? You got 4 lines in the forwards and 3 lines in the back. But also, you don't want everybody changing at once. You don't want all 5 of your players going to the bench for a change at the exact same time. And so, in this way, you stagger it, right? Like, you can change your forward lines, your defensemen are still out there. You can change your defense while your forwards have the puck in the offensive zone, and you're not leaving the ice unattended, right? Leaving your goalie out by himself. On the power play, that's a little bit different, right? Because the power play is a different animal, you do tend to have your power play is a group of 5. Generally, PP1 is a group of 5, PP2 is a group of 5. Because of that. But often, most power plays play 4 forwards and 1 defenseman on the power play. So, unless you have 2 really good defensive, like offensive, even the Avalanche, who have great offensive defensemen, still play 4 and 1 on their first power play and 3 and 2 on their second. So yeah, there you go. Cool. All right, what's next?
That makes a lot of sense. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Smiley, I having watched hockey a bunch recently, I was surprised by something. I thought of hockey as a game traditionally played on the ice, where the puck stayed on the ice. I was surprised how much time the puck spends in the air, and honestly, how many times people touch it with their gloves. Could you explain a little bit about why this is even legal in this game? Like, what? I
think a lot of people probably think of it like soccer, where you're literally, if you touch the ball with your hand, it's a handball, and like you literally cannot
penalty. And exactly,
you can't do that, right? In hockey, that's not the case. The rule in hockey is you cannot close your hand on the puck at any time, whether it's in the air or on the ground. If you close your hand on the puck in the crease, it's a penalty shot.
What's in the crease?
The crease is the little blue area where the goalie lives.
Got it.
So if like the puck is like there to like if a guy tries to like cover the puck for the goal, that's not the goalie. That is illegal. That's not just a penalty. It's a penalty shot. But otherwise, closing your hand on the puck is a penalty. It's I don't know if it's considered a delay a game or if it's its own penalty, but you don't see it too much. But every now and then you will. What? I just said I'm not
Closing
sure.
Gotcha.
It's I don't know if the penalty is actually.
They called it one time and I was confused because they called it and it didn't look to me any different than the rest of the time when they bat it down.
Yeah, it was because he grabbed it.
And
you can't so you can reach up and you can basically swat at it, right? Like if you grab it and kind of just direct it down, push it, they say that's okay. But if you grab it and try to drop it or throw it or direct it that way, that's where they draw the line. And again, there's a little bit of subjectivity there.
Grab, swing, and then he placed
it was he was trying, like he knew what he was doing, right? Like he was trying to kind of get away with one. But yes, I do remember that play, and
I think they called it a hand pass, if I remember correctly.
No,
they said hand something.
All right.
So a hand pass is a little bit different. A hand pass is not a penalty; it's a stoppage. It's more like icing or offsides, which I think we may have an offside question coming up here too. But that's just a stoppage in play, and it kind of comes out. Whoever the offending team is, kind of the face-off doesn't benefit them, basically where it is. So here's the thing to know about hand passes, though. If you're in your own defensive zone, it's legal to pass it with your hand. You still can't close your hand on the puck, but like you can like push it if it's on the ice or swat it to another player.
Right.
As long as you're in your own defensive zone, you're allowed to do that. You cannot do that in the neutral zone or the offensive zone, nor can you pass it from the defensive zone to the neutral zone or the offensive zone. So you can't like push it up the ice. And again, if you touch it, it's not like go to the box penalty. It's just a stoppage, and we do it again. But so that's something that confuses people sometimes, is that you'll get these hand passes that are whistled, but then you'll see somebody pass it with your hand, and you're like, hand pass. You're like, oh, well, why didn't you call that?
Right.
It's in the defensive zone. It's legal for your team. So,
well,
that's one that took me a while, because I was like, what's going on here? This is ridiculous.
Very helpful.
All right. So speaking of ridiculous, what the hell is offsides?
Offsides. It's not that hard. It's really not. It's not like soccer where the offside line actually moves based on where the players are.
Where the
ridiculous.
most forward player or whatever is.
That's
asinine.
out of control. I have no idea how soccer is such a weird game. I like soccer. I do like it, but it's
like hockey, but with a soccer ball.
It's like hockey, but not as good. That's how I see it.
Not as fast.
If hockey didn't exist, I would love soccer, but hockey does exist, and so it's just better in every way. But so basically, the offside lines are the blue lines, right? The center line is red, and then you got the two blue lines that separate the neutral zone from.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that the neutral zone?
Yes, the neutral zone is within the two blue lines, and then you have either your offensive or defensive zone, depending which side of the puck you're on.
And you got the red line going down the middle, and then you have the red line at the goals, which is where you get your icing from and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, cool. Exactly. And so the keys for offsides and icing are as follows. If the puck is on your side of the center line and it crosses all the way to the far center, the goal line, basically if it crosses, we're talking about icing. If it crosses two red lines, that's considered an icing. And it'll come back down. What
goal line while your defense and then the center red line? Is that not icing?
That's okay. So that used to be a penalty. Not a penalty, but that used to be a call back in the early 2000s and the 90s and 80s and stuff. That was called a two-line pass, where they were trying to keep people from just like shooting it all the way out there. But they basically said that's just like causing unnecessary stoppages and slowing the game down. We already have offside to prevent cherry picking.
Yeah, exactly.
It was kind of unnecessary. They got rid of that.
I got it.
Yeah, it's weird. Offside, on the other hand, are the blue lines, right? And so the rule is you cannot advance into the attacking zone, the offensive zone, ahead of the puck, right? If you get in ahead of the puck, that's offside. It's very straightforward. No part of your body, like at least, I'm sorry, that's not true. And maybe this is where it gets a little confusing. As long as there's a part of your body behind the blue line, you're still considered to be onside. Right, so that's why you'll see guys coming down the line like this, like their legs, like way back,
like figure skaters,
like the slow mo with the puck and their leg and stuff like that. Before.
Yes, as long as that foot is behind the line when the puck comes across, they're all right. But if you're completely in the offensive zone before the puck, that's offside, and the play is blown dead. And so
the spirit of the rule is to keep people from camping in the other side and you shooting a puck over to them.
Yeah. So that way you don't just say, well, I'm just going to leave a guy right down here in front of the goalie. And as soon as my guy gets it, he's just going to whip it down here. And now you're defensively, like you have to choose. Do you want to keep a guy down here with him and only attack with 4?
Right.
Like, so that's what it is. You do still see people try to take advantage and time it just right so that they leave the zone when your guy gets possession. They hit him with what's called like a home run pass. So they get it like right as they're getting to the blue line so that they're not offside. So you can still take advantage of that sort of thing, like a cherry picking situation if you're smart about it, but it takes a lot more skill to actually pull it off. And your defense actually has a chance to say, hey, what's this guy doing? I better get back. So that's how that works. Offsides is something, I know we're going to get to challenges here in a little bit. Offside is something that can be challenged by the coach.
And that can be easily reviewed, right? With the camera, you just
they have very good goal line cameras now, and they can see pretty clearly whether you were there. What they also have decided, I think it was just this year, is that before you had to have your foot like touching the ice. Right now, they treat the offside line the way they do like the end zone in football, that it extends into the air along the line. So
And
as
as
long
long
as
as you're just
your leg is back, it doesn't actually have to be on the ice. Because there's a couple of controversial ones in the past where like, okay, the guy's foot was behind the line, but was it touching the ice or was it like
and
this
then
far
how do
off?
you
And
really
like,
see that? Yeah.
so they kind of they're trying to clean that up. I think they've done a better job of it this year. I actually think the rule has helped. We haven't seen a lot of controversial offside calls as much.
Cool. That makes sense.
Well, Smiley, you
Do you
mentioned.
want to go? Do you want to go into challenges and timeouts?
Yeah,
And
that's
stuff?
actually what I was going to ask you about that. Van and I were watching a game the other day, and we noticed that they never take timeouts, and then we saw something where there was a challenge, and it was all very confusing.
Okay, so this is good. It's not as bad as it sounds. It's a much better system than, say, like basketball, where they each get like 6 timeouts or 8 timeouts or something, and they just call timeout incessantly down the stretch. And so the last 2 minutes of the game last 35 real time minutes because all you're doing is calling timeouts. Each team gets 1 timeout for the game. It cannot be called after an icing. They changed that recently to give your guys a chance to rest. And it's also used for a challenge. A coach can challenge one of 2 situations. They can challenge offsides if they think the play was offside. They can challenge goaltender interference if they believe there's goaltender interference. That's what you generally see is the goaltender interference one. The refs have gotten very good with the offside, I feel like.
That bit
they
us in
haven't
the
been
ass
missing that as much.
in the last series against the Wild.
The goaltender interference one?
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing that so they implemented challenges a couple years ago, and it was interesting because you were given 1 challenge per game, and if you didn't get it, you lost your timeout. And then after that, if you needed to challenge again and you failed, it was a 2-minute penalty. But because of this, most teams were feeling like I've got a challenge to use. And so almost every game, anything that was even like remote, like could it be offside? Oh, it was kind of close. Could that have been interference?
Convince someone. Yeah.
Like, let's try it and see. And because especially goalie interference is probably the most subjective call. It is very inconsistent. It's hard to know. Like I swear every game I'm like I've probably got less than 50% accuracy in guessing whether or not they're going to overturn a goalie interference call. Like it is hard to know what they're like. There's times when I'm like, there's no way, and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna call, we see interference there. And times when it's like, well, yesterday it was just like that, and they said yes, and they're like, nope, no interference here.
Yeah.
So because of that, they were just throwing all kinds of stuff out, and because it was so inconsistent, people were very upset about it, and so they changed it to be now you don't lose your timeout anymore if you challenge. But if you're wrong, it's a 2-minute penalty for delaying the game. So if you challenge,
that's pretty smart.
Yeah,
Sucks.
and all of a sudden, you notice there aren't that many challenges unless like a team, like you see it more now if a team really feels like there was interference, or if it's like a backbreaker goal. If it's like, okay, this is going to put us down 3. We have to challenge here because we're even okay. If we don't get it, we're toast regardless. So, but those are the only 2 things you can really challenge, I believe, is offside and goaltender interference. So you don't see it that much, but it does happen from time to time. And timeouts,
right. So
you have 1. Coaches tend to save it for the very end of the game. So like if you're down by a goal, or even maybe up by a goal, and your guys on the ice need a rest, whether it's your offensive or defensive guys. More often offensively, right? Like you're down by a goal, you need to play. Your goaltenders may be pulled. There's 30 seconds left. Your main guys have been out there for the last minute trying to get the goal, and now they're gassed. You get the timeout. You give your guys a chance to rest. You draw up a play. You try to get that equalizer goal. You cannot, unlike some games, like basketball, you cannot call a timeout while play is going on. So timeout is only in while the play is already stopped. You can extend it for 6. I think it's a 60-second timeout. So does that answer that question?
Yeah.
And yes, there are actual plays.
Quickly, one more. Yeah. All right. Let's combo this one real quick.
Yeah.
What the heck is the purpose of the coach, if you can quickly? And then are there actual plays like in football, basketball, where they strategically write on a whiteboard what they expect people to do?
Absolutely. There are almost always that come in off of face-offs. Once you kind of get mixed up, who knows? But like there are definitely set plays, especially off the draw, right? When you win a face-off, you talk a lot of times they talk about it in advance, and people will go to certain spots where it's like it's an opportunity to say, if I can win this back to my guy on the point, he knows exactly where everyone's going, so he can make a pass to a certain spot knowing that somebody's going to be there.
I've seen that 1,000 times.
Yes,
like
and
wins the face off just right away, ricochets to the other side of the rink. There's somebody there, and he's banking it.
Ready
it's like
for it. Exactly.
You had to plan that. There's no way that was by accident.
Yep, and that's why those offensive zone faceoffs, or conversely defensive zone faceoffs, are so important. Because if you lose that faceoff, you're basically giving the team a chance to execute a play that that has maybe a little bit better chance of success than normal course of play.
Right. Just
Right. Coach does a lot of things, right? I probably can't get to everything a coach does, but primarily the coach is in charge of not only ordering the lines, but choosing who to rolls out. They're basically the ultimate arbitrary of playing time, right? Which line's going out next? Which defensive pair is going out next? Who's on the ice after this face-off or in this situation? They're the ones kind of orchestrating that. Obviously, they get their timeouts and their challenges, and obviously they do a ton during the week. Preparing the team, each coach, like
training and all that other stuff.
It may not look like it, especially when you first get into hockey, because the game's so fast and so much is going around. But there are different systems. There's different coaching systems. There's different coaching styles that different coaches have different philosophies that kind of change the way your team plays, what they're trying to do, how they attack in the offensive zone, how they come back and defend in the defensive zone. They're all kind of different strategies and layouts, and who cover, whether you play even in football, whether you play like a zone defense versus a man-to-man defense. That's a thing in hockey. Different coaches have different opinions on it, so they do a lot of stuff that maybe you don't realize behind the scene. You also have assistant coaches that tend to focus on specialty teams, like your power play and your penalty kill. The head coach, depending on their strengths, may delegate that kind of stuff to a secondary coach to really work with the power play teams and draw up plays for the power play. So
I know we're out of time, but the last question I have is, and it's in line with this what we're talking about. So are plays being called by the line in the moment? Or is the ref shouting them from the sideline or anything like that? Or
you mean the coach? The coach
like plan B? Yeah, sorry, the coach.
I don't think the ref tells them what to do.
No, he shouldn't.
Take the shot. Take the shot.
It's definitely a bit of both. It depends who's on the who the coaches, who the players are, how experienced. But just like when football, right? Like with a young quarterback,
that makes sense.
Right, the coach is going to be much more involved.
Be a little more. Yeah.
If you've got a Peyton Manning or a Tom Brady or somebody,
you're letting him do his game.
They're a little bit more autonomous. And it's the same thing. Like the coach maybe will give a general thing, and then but you see players all the time talking before a face-off, talking to each other, pointing. Blah, 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 blah. What are they saying? They're planning that kind of stuff. They're saying, if this goes this way, I'm going to do this, or we're going to run this play, and if I lose it, we're going to run that play, and just be ready for that. So
I feel like you've really demystified the game in this past hour, Smiley. I
hope so. I hope it was helpful and not just me yappering.
Especially the last answer. I always assumed when players were talking before a face-off, they were like, "Man, Pacioretty's such a funny name," or what? Who would name their kid Landeskog
right now? Petriangelo. Have you seen his new commercial? Yeah.
How's the wife? How's the kids?
Yeah.
You guys working more for dinner tomorrow? All right.
Yeah.
Where are we going? Where are we going after
the game? That's awesome, dude.
We Freddy's or what?
Ooh,
that's good stuff. I like it.
Yeah. All right. Well, if there's any other question, if there's a burning question we didn't get to, maybe make a great question of the day next week. We'll have to see. All right.
I don't know how we would answer that if we don't know. If we don't know about hockey.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess.
Well, we always invite the audience to.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We can take a guess. What do you think this means?
And then I'll tell you if you're right. That'll be
exactly.
fun. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was saying it wouldn't help you and me at all.
All right. Well, do you guys have anything else before we wrap it up here?
Man. That was awesome.
All right.
Good job.
Well, if you have a question, the AMA is open to Smiley, to our listeners. If you've got something, hit us up. We have an email address. It's focustargetpodcast@gmail.com. That would be the best place to ask your questions. I will answer them personally if I get them. Anything you want to know about hockey, I'll try to answer it for you. You can also hit us up on Twitter at Focus Target. We've got a YouTube page, Focus Target Podcast. And of course, we are streaming live on Twitch, not on the Switch, not on the Switch Pro, not on the Super Nintendo Switch. Maybe one day. But right now, twitch.tv/Focus Target Podcast. You can join us. Obviously, we're going Friday. We had some scheduling conflicts this week. Normally, we try to be rolling out on Tuesdays. So that's what we're going to try to get back to next week. So thank you for joining us for Season 3, Episode 92. I am your host, Smiley.
This is Shy.
And I'm Ben. As always, cover us, Porkins. We're out.